So just the other day, somebody told me, "Oh man, Ava, you really need to get a better camera if it's automatic cropping or whatever it is." And I'm like, "No, no, no, I just got to figure out the settings." Well, I just spent the last half hour playing around with the settings, and actually, it's like 800 by 600. It was zoomed in like this. You know, I'm like, why? Why are you zoomed in like that? So actually, it'd be more like that. So yeah, I guess I don't know. Maybe I do need a new camera, or maybe I actually do need the camera settings changed. I don't even. Like I've tried to record it like 1080 by whatever, but every time I do, it crops it down smaller and smaller. So even though the size of it is correct, it's the resolution. It zooms in, or you know. So, anyways, it's 10:51 p.m. on was it a Thursday? Yeah, I think today's still Thursday. It's ordinarily a bad idea for me to do recordings after dinner this late in the evening, but I'm like, you know what? I'm enthusiastic enough and depressed enough from the camera, messing around with the camera, that I'll just give it a go and get it over with. So, been a couple of months since I visited Eaglemoss because pandemics and whatever. But this one leapt out at me, and I'm like, yeah, this exists. Maybe I should do something about it. So fortunately for me, this is actually a small purchase from Eaglemoss, or at least one of their sellers overseas, or something like that. And that is simply the Daedalus class U.S.S. Horizon from Star Trek. It's debatable whether this is canon or not canon, because we've seen a model, like a foot and a half long model of it on Captain Sisko's desk, or not on his desk proper, because that's where the baseball belongs, but no, on one of the desks off to the right side, or like a table off to the right side of his desk. But so we've seen it there enough times. And we also know that the name is in the registry of official canon names, or whatever it is, and we know that it's called the Daedalus class, but we've never actually seen the ship itself. We've seen a model of the ship on screen, but that doesn't necessarily make it canon. So the USS Horizon, or just Daedalus class, kind of occupies a weird place in Star Trek canon, at least until 2009 came along, and then all bets were off at that point. So yeah, I'm going to be unboxing this now. Before I started recording, I should point out that even though I got this today, and even though I got it from an overseas seller, um, I double checked the order where I purchased this from, and I double checked the confirmation, and I also double checked the description of where I purchased it from, and it says that there was a magazine included, but when this arrived on my doorstep today, it did not come with the magazine. So I'm going to email them and find out what's going on. The part of the problem is that they don't make the Daedalus class anymore, at least not this size. If they're making a larger version, I'm not aware of it at this point. Oh, God, that's a whole other thing. Yeah. So if they're making another version of this, or a reissue of this, I'm not aware of it at this point. So I'm going to, if the seller won't give me a magazine, then I'm going to email Eaglemoss and see if they will give me one. Because, like, hey, I've got it. So I'll see if I can get a magazine for that. Because they do have, like, it's like a 20-page magazine, 8.5 by 11 and all that good stuff. So, I really, really want, I'm like, I kind of know the history of this already, but, like, it's nice to be able to see it in black and white and color, actually. So, yeah, the Daedalus class from Eaglemoss. So I'm hoping this is going to be a relatively short unboxing. I don't know. So what the ruddy heck is the Daedalus class, and why am I only just now hearing about it? Well, the Daedalus class is and is not canon, because oh boy, how the hell do I get this out of here? That's how. Because technically you have, and technically you have not seen this before. Because the Daedalus class, actually not even the name of it, like I don't know where the name came. Oh, that's cool. Because the name, I don't know about the name, so whatever. But anyways, the Daedalus class is directly based upon a concept sketch for the original TOS Enterprise. Matt Jeffries himself, as he was designing what at that time was going to be called the U.S.S. Yorktown, or just Yorktown. I don't know when the U.S.S. was added in. This was one of the sketches that he came up for as he was coming up with the shape of his 21st century ship or whatever it was. And this is one of the sketches that he produced. And then I don't know how it is. Now, it was just a sketch. It was just some cylinders and a sphere, and that was it. That's all that Matt Jeffries really did. In fact, if you've... Oh, I didn't even think of that when I... Let me grab it here real quick. I can actually prove it to you. Hang on. So I've known about this for, well, as long as I've been alive, and that is The Making of Star Trek. This book was published in 1968 after the second season had finished, and they were already on their way to making the third season when this had published. So the third season had not happened yet, but it was on the way. And we're talking 1968 when this book was originally published. Very, very useful book. Very, very wonderful book. Very detailed book. And it's behind the scenes of what Roddenberry was thinking. I mean, it's not by him. It's actually written by somebody else. But it's behind the scenes of the concept of Star Trek, how the show is actually, how it goes from script to pre-production to production to post-production, and it just generally talks about how television was produced in 1966. So this is not just historically significant because it's Star Trek. It's literally, there it is right there, The Making of Star Trek. But it's significant because it describes television in the 1960s in a very intricate detail. Which is really amazing. You can actually see the bookmark sitting up here. So I was recently reading this, and it actually inspired me to pick up the Daedalus class. So anyways, one of the things that they provide in here, let's see, they provide a number of black and white pictures because, black and white. Here are some, and hopefully I can find some pictures to put over there of some of this. I'm not certain of all of it. But anyways, these are some of the earliest sketches of what Matt Jeffries was thinking. Oh, that light. Some of the earliest sketches of what Matt Jeffries was thinking. It just gets fuzzier. I wish the resolution was higher. I'm so sorry. So anyways, here's kind of what Jeffries was thinking. And keep in mind that Matt Jeffries was an aeronautical engineer by trade. He served during World War II, as did many of the senior staff of the original Star Trek series. Many of them were soldiers and Marines and stuff like that. So or sailors, soldiers, and Marines and airmen. Many of them were. In fact, Gene Roddenberry was a bomber pilot. You know, he was actually dropping bombs in Europe before he created Star Trek. So, anyways, Matt Jeffries, being technically minded, he's like, well, what can I do about it? And you can see there's a cargo bay. You take this pod here, and there's two large doors that open up on the top, and then you can insert stuff into the cargo bay. So that's what this picture represents right here. It's like here it is, it's closed, and then it's partially opened and it's fully opened here. I don't know what goes in there, and the book doesn't say, because like it's just, he's just throwing things out there, you know. You can see here's the engineering hull and pylons and the neck, and then the primary hull, you know, and then warp nacelles. They weren't calling those at the time. It was just kind of power plants or engine pods is usually what they were called. And then he went from this down to this. It's slightly different now. It's coming out of a central neck here instead of everything branching off of instead of everything branching off of the primary hull. And then here comes the interesting part. We come to these two pictures. And you can see here a little more refinement. It's a little closer to what TOS is. They're getting a little, or he's getting a little closer. All he has to do really is take the nacelles, pull them back a little bit, and then add in pylons. So this is getting closer. But take a look at this picture down here. This is. Eek. I got to be really careful because it's so thin. Is this? Just turn the other direction. So that's where this comes from. This is a refined version of a concept sketch of the original USS Enterprise. So that's why it occupies kind of a strange place in canon. Let me see if there's another picture in here. Yeah, so that's all the concept sketches. And like I said, there's probably others, but those are just the ones that are provided here. So, anyways, um, yeah, and you can see that's what the Yorktown, later renamed to Enterprise, that's what it was going to be at some point. And you can even see he specifies here that the nacelles, or I'm sorry, the pylons, do not come straight out. They're actually tilted oh so slightly upwards. So he's already thinking about that, in 1965, actually, in 65 when he says that. So, and obviously there's republishings of this. So if you can get your hands on the making of Star Trek and You're a Trekker, this is a gold mine about the origins of Star Trek. It really, really is. And there are many, many, many quotes from Gene Roddenberry and other staff members in this book. Really, really valuable information here. Um, let's see, what's a good. Okay, yeah. So yeah, get this if you can. This is absolutely worth it. And of course, during both the TMP or the during both the TOS movie era, which was Star Trek: The Motion Picture, TMP through Star Trek 6, and then even into the Rick Berman era, which is 1987 to 2005. Star Trek was known for taking concept models and proof of concept models or whatever it is that were just kind of foam and no bigger than this, or taking concept sketches for ships which were eventually approved of, but the sketches themselves were not, and so they would just take those designs and kind of give them a little bit of detail, and then they would just kind of quietly stick them in the background, or they'd have them hanging up over here, or have it, sitting down here, or something like that. And actually, if you watch my video of the U.S.S. Excelsior, Eaglemoss's XL edition Excelsior, if you watch that video, I actually point out where a concept sketch for a movie version of the TOS era Enterprise. There's a concept sketch. Gets made into a physical model, and then the model actually ends up in the background within space dock in Star Trek 3. So that's one example. If you look at, I believe it's the Star Trek: The Next Generation, Best of Both Worlds Part 2 specifically, as they're going through the debris field at the Battle of Wolf 359, you will see a lot of not just scratch built ships that they just kind of threw together, bought up a bunch of Enterprise models and damaged the heck out of them and then threw them out there, but they also have a number of concept ships floating around in there as well. And so, like I said, this from what was it from what was it be okay, I'll just say from Search of Spock. I wanted to say Wrath of Khan because it's such a good movie, but no, but basically from the point of Search for Spock up until the end of Enterprise, they were reusing assets every now and then. And so what ended up happening is the Daedalus class was indeed just that sketch that I just showed you. That's what it was. And I don't remember, gosh, if only I had that 20-page book, it would actually explain all of these things. But I'm just having to recall it from memory. But anyways, what ended up happening is I don't remember who it is. It might have been the Okudas. It might have been Rick Sternbach. I mean, we're talking the 1980s when this finalized version showed up. Eventually, what ended up happening is somebody took that concept sketch and fleshed it out. And I also want to say that what was it? The Star Trek Encyclopedia, which would have come out in the 1990s, real fat, really big book. That was basically before wikis were a thing. It was the wiki at that point. It was an encyclopedia that had a detailed picture of this. It's somebody had obviously detailed the crap out of it, and so you ended up with enough detail that Eaglemoss, decades later, could come along and make this. So that's where this comes into play. Hmm. The what we call Boussard Collectors, I don't know what they are, but the Boussard Collectors are transparent red, very, very tiny. Let's see. You can see one right there. They've got these projections coming out the front, which, by the way, the TOS Enterprise also had something similar. They were like golden spike or something like that, some sort of an antenna thing sticking out the front for the pilot episode, which was the cage. It had something like that. So, but they changed it. But anyways, oh, I thought those were transparent. But anyways, the Boussard Collectors are transparent. They are transparent red, but I don't know, some sort of like silver or pink colored plastic on the interior that I can't quite identify. So, and then the back of the nacelles are not just black; they're actually a light blue color. They've actually been painted light blue. And you can also see the interior. God, I wish I had better lighting. The where am I pointing? The interior has kind of a similar vent along the inner side here, which the finalized Enterprise did eventually get, and what we associate nowadays with a warp coil grill, except that there is a grill pattern in there, or there's a mesh pattern, but it's not painted. It's not the blue that we associate, because the only blue is really on the back here, and then a bunch of windows on here. Oh yeah, by the way, there's windows on here. So this is one of the concepts that Matt Jeffries came up with for the U.S.S. Yorktown, which was eventually incorporated into the Star Trek Encyclopedia of the 1990s, which eventually found its way onto one of Captain Sisko's tables in his office. So that's where this comes from. And one of the reasons why I think this was rejected is because it's kind of boring. Now, when this was, oh, let me think. Maybe 2001: A Space Odyssey had happened around the time that this happened. I don't remember exactly when A Space 2001 came out. Obviously, it doesn't come out in 2001. Obvious joke is obvious. But that being said, one of the things about the Enterprise, or the TOS Enterprise, is it wasn't just the edict of no fins, no flames, no smoke, which we also see here. There's no place for, rocket engines or anything like that. There's truly no fins, because a pylon is not a fin. Keep that in mind. You can see the tilted pylons, or diagonal pylons, right there. And there actually is a shuttle bay. I'm trying to get as good a view in here as I can. There is a shuttle bay right there, and there's a control tower, or a control room, I guess. I guess it'd be shuttle control is just above it, but the shuttle bay itself is just a square on the back, and it has some splits. It's like a garage door, so it literally folds up. It's an articulated garage door, is what it is. And then just underneath it are some lights. The same, red and green um, navigation, not navigation lights, but the lights that a shuttle would use to fly into the shuttle bay. That's there, and then just underneath that, in really thin lettering, it says U.S.S. Horizon. So, in fact, the only place you see the hull number is on the side of the engineering hull, where it says NCC 176, and right below that, United Federation. Not United Federation of Planets, or not even that, because United Federation of Planets, they actually had like four or five different names for this interracial, or I'm sorry, interspecies, yeah, interracial interspecies alliance. They actually had like four or five different names that were floating around before they finally settled on United Federation of Planets. One of the more amusing ones was United Earth Space Probe Agency. That could have been what the Federation was truly called, but they decided to call it the Federation. So, anyways, the decal has been since updated. There's really, and there are other Eaglemoss designs that have done this in the past, but there's really pale. There's some indents. I see that. There's some indents for windows, and there are other areas where the windows are not indented. So it's a mixture of the two. In fact, I can see on the top here, on the very top. I don't know if they're windows. It's difficult to tell here just because there's no cannon. But on the top here, there's a couple of windows up here. I'm just going to call them windows, but there's a couple of windows on the top here that are indented, and then there's paint applied to the top, and yeah, there's window misalignment. So, I mean, the paint applications are clean. There's navigation lights because there's at the top of the nacelles here and here are navigation lights, and they're specifically green here and here, and then there's a small light. I'm not even going to try and show you, but there's a screen or small green light right there as well. So, all on this side they're all painted green, and then on the other side they're all painted red. So it's interesting to see that. And keep in mind, it was a concept sketch that was since then refined. I don't think that Matt Jeffries put this sheer amount of detail into it. So there's a lot of stuff that was added on. For example, it has not one, but count them four what we would associate as navigational deflectors right there. They're painted copper. Very, very fuzzy, very out of focus. I apologize. But there are four of them right there. And they don't just point forward. There's one that points forward, there's one that points left, one that points right, and there's a fourth one that points down. So they're not even pointing all the same direction. They're all pointing in different directions. So, and then the other thing is under here, and you're probably not going to be able to see this. In fact, I know you're not. But there's actually a mesh of blue paint that looks like something that we might associate. It's not a cluster of windows, although it still uses the same light blue paint. But it looks like a navigational deflector array, except that it's not the big round dish that we associate, because that's what these are under here. These are dishes, but if that's the case, what's this patch of blue dots right here? I honestly don't know. And then there's a couple of airlocks. They're molded in. There's one there, and then there's another one back here that actually cuts off the red paint, or cuts off the red stripe. This thing is covered in airlocks. It's ridiculous. Oh yeah, here's the underside if you can see any of it. They've got kind of similar markings for like the ejection port for the warp reactor, or emergency ejection port for the warp reactor, and there's some other things under here which are very much inspired by what would ultimately be the TOS Enterprise. Those details have been added as well. It's a very compartmentalized and even practical construction, the way that this is done, because these are not just, let's see, it's not just paint you see for these vertical lines here all the way down the warp nacelles and indeed the engineering compartment, but what you're seeing instead is these are raised surfaces, as if they took, very fragile, very fragile. It's as if they took two pre-constructed or prefabricated sections and then bumped one up against the other. And depending on the needs of the ship, they would just add on more. Just one after the other, after the other. So you can see that, which is what we use today. Airplane manufacturers do that when you're building a bridge, like an actual bridge over like water or whatever, prefabricated sections. That's commonly seen. So this also does that. You are not, however, going to see an Aztec pattern. There simply is none. Because really, like, TOS Enterprise didn't have much of an Aztec pattern either. It did, and it has since then been filled out. But no, this does not have an Aztec pattern. But you do have those kind of raised cylindrical lines there, and then there's a number of indents for what we would associate like the deflector grid on the top and bottom of the saucer. Well, it's the same thing here. You've got these indented surfaces. Gosh, I wish I had better lighting, but sorry. Not just lighting, but I wish I could like zoom in the camera, or change the focal length, but I can't. I don't know how well you can see it, but there are also a pair of the impulse engines are right there. Those two red dots, like there are two red squares right there. Actually, that's not too bad. Again, very fuzzy. I apologize. You can see that oh so slight tilt, diagonal tilt on the pylons. Very fuzzy. Shuttle Bay. Very interesting to look at. And then they have a little bit of greeblies added on here as well. So, like I said, the navigational deflectors, or what we would call the navigational deflectors, those are raised surfaces. They're kind of miniature craters, or they're indented. So, and then they're painted with little circles of copper. And the alignment on all of them is fair enough, whatever. There's one, I'll say, glaring manufacturing error. And this is Eaglemoss. Eaglemoss's contribution at this point, I'll say. There's a ridge that runs along the side of the neck, and you can see where the separation point between the plates, or the molds. There's some little bit of mold. I think it's called flashing. When it was tiny little bits of leftover plastic that were not quite cleaned up there. They're close. It's just little bits, but it's one of those things. Is like once you notice it, you can't unsee it. It's that kind of thing. So yeah. And this, I'm sorry, the Daedalus class eventually served as, if I remember the lore, or if I remember the behind the scenes correctly, eventually served as the basis for the Hope class, the U.S.S. Pasteur, which was seen in the series finale of Next Generation. It was Captain Beverly Picard's ship was directly inspired by this. And by the way, Eaglemoss has made one of those, but actually, no, I might get it. I'm not certain. That's something I might get it, but I don't care. I don't know. So I've been holding on to this long enough now. It's kind of gotten to body temperature. Sorry. So it seems there actually is die-cast metal. I can feel the weight of it, and like I said, it was warm enough, or it was cool enough early that I could tell you. But I think the neck and the pylons are a single piece. They're not added on separately. Those um oh wow. There's a little grill pattern on the front and back of the pylons. I didn't even see that till just now. I thought it was more flashing, but no, that's deliberate. They added some kind of a grill pattern on the front, excuse me, and the back of the pylons. That's cool. I like that. Yeah, so this is warm enough at this point. Actually, I'll wait for this to cool down, and then I'll put in captions, or actually the captions are over there. I'll put into captions where precisely the diecast metal is. There is diecast metal in here. It's weighty enough. There is, but just it's warm enough that I've been hanging on to it for long enough. Well, yeah, it's lost its cold touch. So cold touch technique is not going to work at this point in the recording. And the um whatchamacallit, what are they called? I can't talk. Yeah, because it's 11:20 p.m. The warp engine nacelles are aligned with each other. They are aligned, so at least I was lucky in that regard. So, yeah. Yep. God, there's even an access. There's even a docking port on the top of it as well. Huh. Cool. Cool. Very cool. Oh yes, absolutely. You're going to make a short video, Ava. You don't even have print material, and you've gone over 20 minutes. You're almost what? You're almost at 30 minutes right now. So here's the display stand, and here's the typical display base, which is die-cast metal and felt. It's weird because I don't know whether, or I'm sorry, I don't remember. In canon, it's referred to as the Daedalus class, but I don't remember if Eaglemoss calls it the U.S.S. Horizon or if they call it the Daedalus class or whatever it is. Either way, it just says simply on the bottom here, Daedalus class, and then there's a model number. Stick this in there. Oh, that fit very nicely. Oh, that fit very nicely. Very easy. And it's mounted in the center. And oh no, I don't have an instruction booklet to tell me where to mount this thing. And it is mounted from behind on the pylons, and ooh, that fits very nicely. And it's tilted oh so slightly upwards. Right, right. Well, there you go. The Eaglemoss's Daedalus class. Gosh, I wish I had that boat, that magazine. Ah, I miss that thing. Grr. I have to wonder if the magazine even mentions the controversy about Star Trek Enterprise, because that was a really really big thing. Because in 2001, when the series Enterprise, it wasn't called Star Trek Enterprise at that point, it was just simply Enterprise, or ENT. Um, Everybody knew about the Daedalus class. At that point, everybody knew. Like, we might not have had a name for it, or I don't remember if we had a name for it or not at this point. I don't remember. But anyways, everybody knew about that sketch, and everybody knew, we had seen it in Captain Sisko's desk, or his office, I'm sorry. We had seen that, so we were like, yeah, when the announcement for Enterprise came out, oh yes, absolutely. We were thrilled, like, oh my gosh, we're going to get to see that. And it's like, okay, well, it's pre-Federation or whatever it is. And like, okay, whatever it is. Um, but what we ended up getting instead, much to our surprise and even chagrin, was this. Nobody, and I mean nobody, was expecting or wanting this. Because, well, everybody immediately recognized what this was. And that was simply just this. Everybody loved this, loved the hell out of this thing. It was one of the first starship designs, like right next to the Sovereign class Enterprise Echo. This was one of the most popular starship designs of the late '90s and early 2000s. There, like, nobody would argue with that. And so presumably, like, they took this and ended up making this. And a lot of people now remember what I said earlier about reappropriating um, earlier starship designs for use later on or whatever it is. That is true. But the problem is that the NX1 Enterprise was never made as a physical model. Ever, ever, ever for the show. It was always, always, always CGI. Except for the very, very few occasions where they were like walking on the hull or something like that. When you had to have actors touching the hull, yes, then they manufactured a set with a small piece of the Enterprise. But nobody, and I mean nobody, was expecting this. And I've I believe it was my when I talked about the STD Enterprise that I purchased, I said that one of the common complaints about the NX1 is it was not that it was too simple, but it was too detailed. It was too streamlined. There's a lot of conventions that were broken with the NX1. It's not that it had a saucer. That was not the problem. It's that it's things like how smooth and rounded off the pontoons are. Not that it has pontoons, but the way they're shaped. That's where the problems were. And then you had things like the shape of the nacelles. That was a weird thing. And there were a lot of things about the NX1 that just rubbed us the wrong way. That there were too many things that said this looks like something from the 24th century, or it's like a poor man's version of a 24th century Federation starship. That's what this looks like. It looks too advanced. And the reason for that is because, as I just pointed out, it was heavily based, well, it is the Akira-class. It absolutely was. The story behind the NX1 is that they had oops sorry the story about the NX1, or at least how, because the guy who is most credited with designing the NX1 is Doug Drexler. And when they were originally designing the NX1 Enterprise, they were they were just, designing whatever ship it was that they were designing, and then just as they were about to submit it to the higher ups at CBS television at that point, for approval, like, yes, this is what we want our new starship to look like, some random person who already worked at, was it Digital Domain? No, it couldn't have been. I think it was no, it was Foundation Imaging or Foundation Imaging. Yeah, that's who was doing the special effects for Star Trek at that time. But anyways, some random person that was working at Foundation came along and said, "Oh, that looks like Kirk's ship." And Drexler and the other people who had been working on it, they're like, they had been. It was like, they'd had tunnel vision. They were so focused on what they were doing that they kind of forgot what they were doing. And so basically, the starship that they'd been designing for months ended up looking almost like the TOS Enterprise, just more detailed or with slightly different shapes. And so they're like, well, fuck it. We can't use that now. So literally, the design they'd been working on for months got thrown out in one day. And then I don't know the exact story, but I'm guessing that some executive said, hey, the Akira-class is pretty darn popular. Why don't you just take that and use that somehow? And so that is ultimately what we ended up with the Akira Prize. That's why we call it the Akira Prize, is because there's so many similarities to it. And I've heard arguments saying, oh, no, it makes a perfect sense of the evolution of starship design. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You can't make that argument. Although, admittedly, I tried to make that argument with the STD Enterprise that Eaglemoss released. I did. I've got my 2 cents on it. And since 2001, I have made peace with the Akira Prize, but I mean, I'm still allowed to not like some parts of it. So yeah. And as I pointed out, yes, I do have an Akira class as well. And this thing is still looks like a freaking, I don't know why, but it has kind of a here. Let me show you the angle that I'm looking at. Oh, I really shouldn't hang out that upside down, but check out this angle. I was just looking at it just now, and I'm like, damn, that looks sexy right there. That angle. Let's see. Let me get. See what that looks like? That is sexy right there. Just oh. So that long 8.5 minute rant aside, what we ended up getting for Star Trek Enterprise was this, and a lot of people, including myself, rejected it because, well, simply put, we were all anticipating this. This is what we were expecting, and this is what we ended up with. So, like, they could easily have done like a heavy CGI version of this, or even they could have, modified this to make it look even simpler, just with more surface detail or whatever it is. I had no problem with the surface detail. I mean, it's CGI. You had to make it look like that. So I'm not gonna cry about that. But it's like, all the nice curves. Look how geometric this is. It's just a sphere and a couple of cylinders, and then there's a dome on the front of either thing, and that's it. It's just some cylinders and a dome. Now and this is probably the reason why what we now know of it, why the U.S.S. Horizon was rejected in the first place, is because it's boring. And even if you look at it from the front, it's not very memorable. To be fair, it's not. It's just a bunch of circles from the front. It's just no one cares. And oh, by the way, it's a bunch of circles from the back as well. It's just some boxes, rectangular boxes in a sphere. One of the things, I don't know what it's called. I think it's called the rule of threes. And I'm not an art major. I don't know anything about this, but it has something to do with if you create a 3 by 3 grid of a picture. If you take any picture of a spaceship or a creature, whatever that is, and then you put your ship inside of that grid. You want to have your ship or your vehicle or your animal or whatever it is. You want to have it fill up that grid as much as possible, regardless of what angle you're looking at. You want to have it filled up, and not just filled up, but you want to have it filled up with interesting things, and not just from silhouettes, the sides, the front, the top, the bottom, but you also want to be able to turn it. You want to be able to have it be interesting, regardless of Jesus. Oh no, that's okay. Oh, I scared myself. Regardless of which angle it looks at. you want to be able to have your ship look as interesting as possible, regardless of, like, you want to have something up in this quadrant, you want to have something down here, you want to have something here, something down here. So you always want something interesting to look at. And I will pull out the Akira-class because it does not get nearly enough respect. Shut your face. Again, if you're looking at it from the side, it's kind of no problem, whatever. You look at it from the front, yeah, okay, it's kind of not a problem. I'm trying to center on the screen here. But it's when you start turning it like this. Look at all the interesting things that are happening here. You've got some sort of technology here. You've got these pontoons here. You've got whatever this is up here. And then you've got this super detailed stuff here. So there's all kinds of interesting things happening here. And the exact same thing when you tilt it upwards like this. Look at how it fills up the screen. And again, apologies for the top and the bottom auto cropping. I have no control over that. But look at how it fills up the screen, you know. And then here it is again. Look at the way it fills up the screen, and there's something interesting happening all the time. So it's not just at one specific angle it has to look neat, but it's like when you tilt it, that's when the rule of threes comes into play. In 1965, Matt Jeffries knew about that. He knew because it's like, again, if you look at it from the side or from the front, it's not very interesting. If you tilt it at an angle like this, yeah, it kind of fills it up. But again, you've just got a bunch of cylinders in a sphere. And really, these look like rocket engines. This looks like a rocket engine. Or not an engine, but it looks like, that's where the fuel is stored. That's where, So when they were when designing the TOS Enterprise, Matt Jeffries knew about this thing, or at least that's the theory, is that he knew about the rule of threes. And so when he was designing TOS Enterprise, he knew that he needed to fill it out a little bit more. And so again, this is a concept sketch, just throwing it out there, but eventually he would fill it out. He would take the pylons, or he would take the engines, and he would raise them up. And indeed, look how freaking long these engine pods are. He actually shrank them down a bit. He made them a bit shorter. He changed the proportions here, and he made the neck. The neck would eventually, stick out like this. And then, because flying saucers were all the craze at the time, he gave the Enterprise a literal flying saucer. Now, from a practical standpoint, in like real world physics or whatever it is, believe it or not, this actually does make a degree of sense. It would make sense that the habitat section of the ship would be a sphere, because spheres actually have more internal volume than a cylinder of equivalent diameter, or something to that effect. I don't know. So when you look at this, it's boring. It's boring. And Jeffries knew that. And not just Jeffries, but Roddenberry also knew it. Those studio executives. It's boring. And by the way, look at this. At certain angles, you can actually make this warp nacelle completely disappear. You can make it disappear. If you put this into a black and white silhouette, you can make that engine pod disappear entirely. So what you would have to do is actually raise it up, make that engine pod higher in order to make a difference. So even though this was based on a concept sketch, they knew that it wasn't enough. There was that one picture I showed you in this book, and I'll dig it up again here. Eventually you can see it doesn't really, it's just boring cylinders. Now, obviously, as a concept sketch, it's not going to have a lot of detail. It's really not. But you can see there's some windows here, whatever it is, and there's a little bit of ribbing here, just like on the finalized version. But you can see, look how interesting this is. It's about what's memorable, not necessarily scientifically accurate, because, well, I won't get into that, but you have to make it memorable. You've got to make it interesting to look at. And the other thing that Roddenberry knew is that you have to be able to recognize it from a distance. You have to be able to look at that silhouette and say, oh, that's the Enterprise from Star Trek. Of all the spaceships that were out there. And keep in mind, when the original series was out, there was another UFO that was built by humans that was floating around on television at that point. The Jupiter 2 from Lost in Space. It was a UFO. It was a flying saucer. It was a fat flying saucer, but still it was, and it even had tripod or whatever it is. So they knew going into that they needed to do something different. They needed to be brand recognizable. And so something like this, yeah, it might be scientifically accurate, or it's close to or scientifically feasible. I'll say scientifically or engineering wise, might have been feasible in that regard. But if the audience doesn't attach to it, it's just some silliness. I mean, can you imagine this being our starship for 45, 50 years? Not really. I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing. Like if you compare it to the U.S.S. Discovery from 2001: A Space Odyssey, as opposed to the other U.S.S. Discovery I'm not going to talk about. If you compare it to that, then yeah, you can kind of see the similarity there. But that's not what they were aiming for at the time, you know. So, yeah, this is. I completely forgot why I was bringing that up. So this is what we were expecting in 2001, and it's ultimately what we did not get, and we're still kind of waiting for it. Now, the excuse nowadays, since Enterprise Heatwave, seriously, get rid of that sword. Get the excuse nowadays, or at least as of 2001, and it's nowadays we would call it a soft recon or retcon. I'm sorry, we'd call it a soft retcon. But the idea is that the NX-1 class was not a Federation starship. It was a Starfleet ship. It was an Earth ship before the Federation, and that the Horizon, the Daedalus class here that you see here, is an early Federation starship. So that's the canon. That's the, I'm content to believe that, but if that's the case, what many people, including myself, still find difficult to believe is that they would go with a saucer and admittedly really small nacelles. The nacelles are actually quite small compared to the rest of the ship. They would go from this, and then like 40 or 50 years later, they would make this. See the difference there? You see how updated and techy and detailed all this is to go down to this, and then from this go to TO or go to the TOS Enterprise. So there's a that's a big reason why the Akira Prize was Akira Prize was rejected, is because it doesn't really fit the lineage of going from this to TOS Enterprise. It doesn't fit. And that's one of the things that the people reject about the Akira Prize, and that's aside from having the actual Akira-class. That's aside from. Not a whole lot else I can say at this point about this, other than I'm really pleased I got it. So, yay. Let's see. Is this cold enough I can touch it now? Nope. It's not cold enough. I feel like I'm missing out on something. Oh, God, yeah, I was thinking. Just under 1 year ago, I showed you this picture in reference to one of my other Eaglemoss unboxings. This, I'm not ashamed to admit, and I said that this is my version, and I came up with this in 2001. That's how old this is. But this is my version of the NX-1 Enterprise, and yes, it was absolutely directly based off of this. Let's see. Okay, it was directly inspired by that. Now there are obvious differences. There's kind of a I suppose now is as good a time as any to point it out. There kind of comes a point in every Trekker's existence, whether you've been a Trekker for half a year or for 20 years or for 30 years or for 30 years, 35 years for me, or whether you've been a Trekker, whether you're a first generation Trekker like my dad, for example. There's, or actually both my parents, there comes a point in every Trekker's existence where they're really engulfed in it. They really enjoy it, where they design aliens. They've done drawings of alien species, and they've done drawings of spaceships and shuttles and buildings and space stations and things like that. Well, You can only kind of make modified versions of that so many times because before you kind of get bored with it. Kind of, in other words, recreating what officially what official canon stuff looks like. You can only take those engine pods or those warp nacelles and put them below the engineering hull, and then oh yeah, it's a brand new ship. Or you can only remove the neck and then bring in the nacelles closer. Or you can only modify that so many times before it gets to the point where you personally get kind of worn out with it and you've been kind of okay, I like the next generation stylings, or I like the next generation movie designs, or I like the TOS era, or I like the NX era aesthetics, or whatever it is. You only do that so much, and then eventually you kind of get bored with it. You get kind of worn out. You understand, okay, the kind of the what's known as the visual rules, the visual language of that particular Star Trek era. You can only do that for so much, and then eventually you personally get bored with it. And there's kind of rite of passage that all Trekkers go through at some point in their existence where they're like, I want to do my own thing from this particular era. So I want to take this Vulcan clothing from the TOS era and I want to do my own version that could fit in the TOS era but just was designed by me. Or I want to take this particular starship from, God forbid, the Secret Hideout era, and I want to make a modified version of that. And yes, I have found those as well. And there have also been plenty of movies 1 through 6 era, the TMP era, where there have been plenty of ships that have been modified based on that, where you're like modifying, Birth class, or I mean, the Reliant class pretty much is just eliminate the engineering hull of the Enterprise, keep the nacelles, put them on the top, and then put a torpedo launcher on the bottom or something like that. I mean, that's what the Reliant is. That's what it was until Nicholas Myers actually signed the blueprint upside down, and then we got the Reliant as we finally know it. But anyways, this was my rite of passage. I was sick and tired, and I've gone over this at length already, but I did not like this in 2001, and it actually took me about 18 years to finally, or 17, or yeah, it took 18 years for me to kind of, like I said, make peace with the Akira prize. It took almost 20 years for me to finally come to terms with it and like, okay, I can live with it, and I made peace with it, and now I accept it. Okay, and the fact that I got this is proof of that. But at the time when I made this drawing in 2001, I was still in rejection mode. I'm like, you know what? I want this, but I want it to appear in the era of Enterprise. And that's what this is. This is not my replacement for the Daedalus class, but this is a more primitive, a more clumsy, a more uh, under refined or unrefined version of this. Because like if this comes after the Akira Prize, then what for me personally would be the stepping stone? It would be this. So that's what this is. This is not me attempting to recreate the Daedalus class, but it's like what would happen, what would be a de-evolution of the Daedalus class. For me, it would be this. So that's what this is. I need to do something with that. That was a neat design. I need to update that 20-year-old thing at this point. Yeah, it's almost 20 years old because I designed that in my last year of high school, which was 2001, and Enterprise came out in, oh, when did Enterprise come out? Late September, early October, I think is when Enterprise made its debut, 2001. So yeah, I need to play around with that a little bit more. I am way off topic, except kind of, sort of, kind of not. But I do know that I've spent way more time on this than I should have. So much for not having the magazine. Yeah, I'm gonna get a hold of Eaglemoss and see if See if they've got any magazines left around without having them send me a duplicate of this, because like I've already got a duplicate of a shuttlecraft set, and I've got a duplicate of the NX1 sitting around here. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do with that? Yeah. But anyways, maybe they've got a couple of magazines left. Oh, really? No. Okay, I don't know. So yep, are they planning on making another one of these? I doubt it. Just because like there is not enough detail even on this to justify making a larger version. So I am not anticipating like an 8-inch version of this. They might, and I might go for it, and that would be $50, But actually, it wouldn't be bad. It'd probably be about that long. So it'd be slightly larger than what we currently have here. And this is what 4 inches. I think this is a little over 4 inches. So like basically be about double the size if they were to do a special edition, which I would not be opposed to. I would not be opposed. So yep, my latest Eaglemoss purchase, and I am not disappointed. That's cool. All right, and so with that, this is AV Unit 4A saying thank you very much for tuning in.